And, Daniel, I noticed the title as I was coming in this morning. It said Objectivist Sunday School. And I think I'm going to embrace that title. And so, welcome to our next installment of Objectivist Sunday School. And of course, we're in part four of our reading of Ayn Rand's famous 1964 Playboy Interview. Uh, we were on one question. Let's back it up to one more question. What about other public needs? And I have two volunteers here in Pooja and Eric, right? So, Pooja, you will be Ayn Rand, and Eric, you will be Alvin Toffler, the Playboy interviewer, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay,
All right.
so
What about other public needs? Do you consider the post office, for example, a legitimate function of government?
Now let's get this straight. My position is fully consistent. Not only the post office, but streets, roads, and above all, schools should all be privately owned and privately run. I advocate the separation of state and economics. The government should be concerned only with those issues which involve use of force. This means the police, the armed services, and the law courts to settle disputes among men. Nothing else. Everything else should be privately run and would be much better run.
Would you create any new government departments or agencies?
No, and I truly cannot discuss things that way. I am not a government planner, nor do I spend my time reinventing utopias. I'm talking about principles whose practical applications are clear. If I have said that I'm opposed to the initiation of force, what else has to be discussed?
what I have to pause there. What a magnificently clear set of answers there that was, right? I mean, just stunning. How she draws it right back to the principle of what government is all about, force. I'm sorry, continue.
No, I just no, I just wanted to like it. I can see how it's so difficult, I think, for the author to not. I mean, the interviewer to get this principle of the initiation of the use of force. Because I just recently actually was back in my hometown, and over the last 30 years, the public school district that I went to, has expanded more than three times the size as it was when I was there. In fact, it's now larger. It has more students than the entire Houston school district. Like, and like you can see the tremendous amount of wealth that they've channeled to build really pretty, arts and science buildings and all this other stuff. And they the thing that's really prominent is they got two spots for the police to park at the very beginning so they can be there just in case something bad happens. Um, but it's just like all of this thinking and working went into doing this, but no one sees that. No, you've coerced all of these people's wealth to build these things, and like you completely have devastated any options of teaching students in a different way. Um,
Right.
and it's
And
just
the increased money doesn't seem to produce any better results in education.
no, like some of the signs in this actually I went to a school that was built after I left, and they have signs saying, be sure to be in your classroom 10 minutes before or 10 minutes after the start of class. And my wife I was telling like, why do they have these signs inside the school and stuff? And she says, oh, well, that's following the money. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like they only get paid if students are in class, right? So like that is the biggest thing they need. They need to make sure the bodies are in the class so they can then ask the state to send them the money.
That's horrifying.
And
Pooja.
it's like anyway.
Yeah, Pooja.
Yeah, I was going to say, she says, I can't discuss things this way. What she's meaning is that this is concrete bound discussion, right? Like
Right,
Oh,
right?
right.
She's like, yeah, go ahead,
Remember
Eric.
the guy? Remember the story that Ayn Rand tells? The guy who got it with the coal and why you shouldn't nationalize the coal industry, but then proceeded to add, well, what about the steel industry? All the same principles apply, right? Do I have to go through this one more time? How many examples do you need? She's saying in principle that the initiation of force is wrong. I apply that to the government. Now, you're asking me about the post office. Would you create some other government agency? She's like, no, roads, especially the schools. This is not, you're not getting the principle. That's what she is exactly putting her finger on. Look, this is a broad abstraction. It is always wrong. The aggressive use of force is always wrong. Get it? It doesn't matter whether it's a criminal. It doesn't matter whether it's the government. I hope this is sinking as an idea. Yeah, she is. She's exactly getting a little irritated at his failure to rise to the conceptual level here. Peter.
Wait, sorry,
Here
Peter.
momentarily.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. Megan will be here momentarily to read Ayn Rand's part. If she can do, she said the condition is she wants to do two voices.
Only two. Okay. Did you have a question, Peter?
No, I just wanted to convey in case you were still
Okay.
figuring out the roles. Yeah.
In the meantime, Eric, you pick it up with our next question.
What about force and foreign policy? You have said that any free nation had the right to invade Nazi Germany during World War II,
Certainly.
and that any free nation today has the moral right, though not the duty, to invade Soviet Russia, Cuba, or any other slave pen, correct?
Correct. A dictatorship, a country that violates the rights of its own citizens, is an outlaw and can claim no rights.
Would you actively advocate that the United States invade Cuba or the Soviet Union?
Not at present. I don't think it's necessary. I would advocate that which the Soviet Union fears above all else, economic boycott. I would advocate a blockade of Cuba and an economic boycott of Soviet Russia. And you would see both those regimes collapse without the loss of a single American life.
I have to pause here. The stunning accuracy of her prediction. The Soviet Empire, including Cuba, could be brought down without the loss of a single American life if we had the moral backbone to do something about it, and to that extent. And remarkably, what was it, about 30 years, less than 30 years later, that's what would happen. America declares the Soviet Empire. They don't even go as far as what Ayn Rand said here, a blockade of Cuba. No, nothing like that. And yet, standing up and calling them an evil empire and building up our forces against them and being tough, even just in the negotiations she said we shouldn't even have with them, was enough to bring down the Soviet Empire. It's really interesting, isn't it? Continuing. Sorry, had to. Oh, Marco and Richard.
I just wanted to add that 30 years after that, it's still valid. If we stop buying stuff from from Russia right now, they wouldn't have invaded Ukraine.
Right. Or China. Right. Right. Exactly right. Her prescient warning, which is based on the same principle that she's been applying to government across the board here. So I love the way actually the interviewer connects it. How about force and foreign policy? This is lovely. Eric.
Would you favor U.S. withdrawal from the United Nations?
Yes, I do not sanction the grotesque pretense of an organization allegedly devoted to world peace and human rights, which includes Soviet Russia, the worst aggressor and bloodiest butcher in history, as one of its members. The notion of protecting rights with Soviet Russia among the protectors is an insult to the concept of rights and to the intelligence of any man who is asked to endorse or sanction such an organization. I do not believe that an individual should cooperate with criminals, and for all the same reasons, I do not believe that free countries should cooperate with dictatorships.
What an amazing analogy. Just as local law enforcement wouldn't partner up with some mafia gang or some street gang, so America should never partner up with a dictatorship. Perfect analogy. Peter.
Yes, I think I mentioned this before, but this seems to be a very pervasive attitude that people have, that once you form a government, all bets are off. Like you can be the most criminal bunch of gangsters, right? Like doesn't matter as long as you
Right,
have your little 2 by 4 bit of land
right.
that you're
What a
the
Russian
government of,
oligarch.
then somehow
Right,
magic, right? Like
right.
you can join any club. You have every
Hey,
right to
let's
to to,
imagine a
to do
country
whatever
run
you want.
by,
Yeah.
yeah, let's imagine a country run by different organized crime syndicates. Isn't that what Russia is with its oligarchs?
Yeah,
But they're a
exactly.
nation, you see. So they're clothed in all that legitimacy because they're a nation and belong to the UN. They're bingo. Okay,
Yeah,
Eric.
it's a kind of state worship that
That is exactly correct.
that regular, like if you are regular organized crime, you don't get that same like carte blanche, that diplomatic immunity, if you will.
Right.
Right? You just need that status. Um, which yeah, must be Hegel, must be Marx, must I'm trying to trace the influence. Plato, of course. But yeah, it seems almost like extremely pervasive, and people think the United Nations is somehow a good thing if you just put all these criminal gangs together. Yeah.
Right. You put Russia and China and North Korea together, you're going to get something other than get ruled by gangsters. Right.
Yeah, yeah, like that Hegel quote, the march of God in the world, that is what the state is, right? And the
Right.
more of that you can get together, the better it must
Right.
be, right? The godlier
Right.
it must be.
The
Yeah.
state is the expression of the zeitgeist, right? And so you submit to it because it's the expression of history. Yeah, Hegel, Eric.
Let's see. Would you advocate severing diplomatic relations with Russia?
Yes,
How do you feel about the test ban treaty, which was recently signed?
I agree with Barry Goldwater's speech on the subject on the Senate floor. The best military authorities, and above all, the best scientific authority, Dr. Thaler, the author of The Hydrogen Bomb, had stated that this treaty is not merely meaningless, but positively dangerous to America's defense.
I must say, stop right there. This was in 1964. In the 1980s, some 20 years later, I would meet Edward Teller himself at an objectivist conference. Then proceed.
Wow.
Yeah. No, he's a
If
cool guy. He was, when he was alive, a very cool guy to talk to. He knew quantum mechanics, and he was a skeptic of the radical view of quantum mechanics. And he was definitely someone who believed that America should be armed to the teeth against the Soviet Empire. So Edward Teller was an interesting guy. He was part of the Manhattan Project. Ayn Rand may have met him originally when she was doing her research for the atomic bomb movie. But she obviously had a good opinion of Edward Teller's view of these sort of things, at least, not claiming him to be an objectivist. But he was an interesting fellow. He really was.
if Senator Goldwater is nominated as the Republican presidential candidate this July, would you vote for him?
At present, yes. When I say at present, I mean the date when this interview is being recorded. I disagree with him on a great many things, but I do agree predominantly with his foreign policy. Of any candidates available today, I regard Barry Goldwater as the best. I would vote for him if he offers us a plausible or at least semi-consistent platform.
How about Richard Nixon?
This is 1964, a presidential election year. Barry Goldwater is the Republican nominee for president this year, but this came out before the Republican convention.
I'm opposed to him. I'm opposed to any compromiser or me tutor. And Mr. Nixon is probably the champion in this regard.
This is great. Years before Richard Nixon will become a compromiser and a me tooer on Johnson's welfare state, on foreign policy and détente with China, on being a crook in Watergate. Ayn Rand is nailing him as a pragmatist, an unprincipled pragmatist. And simply notice she will reluctantly vote for 8 years hence and 4 years hence from this. She would reluctantly vote for Richard Nixon, right? Anti-Nixonites for Nixon. On the other hand, you can see she was a ferocious critic of Nixon all the way along. She first became acquainted with him when she testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee, I think in 1949. Richard Nixon was a member of Congress before he was vice president and was on that committee. Proceed.
What about President Johnson?
I have no opinion. I have no particular opinion.
He is so bad. President Johnson, who gave America Medicare, for example, the first step towards a more socialized medical care system, the guy who got us deeply enmeshed in this altruistic war in Vietnam. He's beneath Ayn Rand's contempt altogether. He is off her radar. I have no particular opinion of Lyndon Johnson. I'm sorry, I just found that utterly. She's getting into the details of Barry Goldwater. I'm critical of some things about him, but he's got a decent foreign policy. Richard Nixon, he's a compromiser and a Me Tooer, and he's the champion in those regards. And then Lyndon Johnson, no. he's followed, but it's more like Howard Rourke and Ellsworth Joy, but I don't think of him. I'm sorry, it's amusing to me, but keep going.
You are a declared anti-communist, anti-socialist, and anti-liberal, yet you reject the notion that you are a conservative. In fact, you have reserved some of your angriest criticisms for conservatives. Where do you stand politically?
Correction. I never describe my position in terms of negatives. I am an advocate of laissez-faire capitalism, of individual rights, there are no others, of individual freedom. It is on this ground that I oppose any doctrine which proposes the sacrifice of the individual to the collective, such as communism, socialism, the welfare state, fascism, Nazism, and modern liberalism. I oppose the conservatives on the same ground. The conservatives are advocates of a mixed economy and of a welfare state. Their difference from the liberals is only one of degree, not of principle.
Wow. You just want to hug her, don't you? Anyway, keep going.
You have charged that America suffers from intellectual bankruptcy. Do you include in this condemnation such right-wing publications as the National Review? Isn't that magazine a powerful voice against all the things you regard as statism?
I consider National Review the worst and the most dangerous magazine in America. The kind of defense that it offers to capitalism results in nothing except the discrediting and destruction of capitalism. Do you want me to tell you why?
Yes, please.
Because it ties capitalism to religion. The ideological position of National Review amounts, in effect, to the following. In order to accept freedom and capitalism, one has to believe in God and in some form of religion, some form of supernatural mysticism, which means that there are no rational grounds on which one can defend capitalism, which amounts to an admission that reason is on the side of capitalism's enemies, that a slave society or a dictatorship is a rational system, and that only on the ground of mystic faith can one believe in freedom. Nothing more derogatory to capitalism could ever be alleged, and the exact opposite is true. Capitalism is the only system that can be defended and validated by reason.
Wow. Just mic drop right there. That's exactly it. National Review in the 1950s and 60s and 70s pursued a policy led by a philosopher friend of William Buckley, the founder and editor, named Frank Meyer, which tried to fuse, it was called fusionism, because it tried to fuse traditionalist religious conservatism with a kind of classical, sort of corrupted version of classical liberalism and free market economics. Ayn Rand thought those two things cannot coexist politically, because altruism can't coexist with capitalism. Therefore, Christianity and mysticism and collectivism obviously cannot coexist with capitalism. That National Review was founded on a contradiction, in effect. And boy, she was on it at the time and nailed it. This was the year, by the way, I think, that the famous ex-communist Max Eastman would resign from the National Review's editorial board because they were too religious. But keep going.
You have attacked Governor Nelson Rockefeller for lumping all opponents of the welfare state with actual crackpots. It was clear from his remarks that, among others, he was aiming his criticism at the John Birch Society. Do you resent being lumped with John Birchers? Do you consider them crackpots or a force for good?
I resent being lumped with anyone. I resent the modern method of never defining ideas and lumping together totally different people into a collective by means of smears and derogatory terms. I resent Governor Rockefeller's smear tactics, his refusal to identify specifically whom and what he meant. As far as I'm concerned, I repeat, I do not want to be lumped with anyone, and certainly not with the John Birch Society. Do I consider them crockpots? No, not necessarily. What is wrong with them is that they don't seem to have any specific, clearly defined political philosophy. Therefore, some of them may be crackpots, others may very well be well-meaning citizens. I consider the Birch Society futile because they are not for capitalism, but merely against communism. I gather they believe that the disastrous state of today's world is caused by a communist conspiracy. This is childishly naive and superficial. No country can be destroyed by a mere conspiracy. It can be destroyed only by ideas. The Birchers seems to be either non-intellectual or anti-intellectual. They do not attach importance to ideas. They do not realize that the great battle in the world today is philosophical, ideological conflict.
Wow.
Are there any political groups in the United States today of which you approve?
Political groups as such, no. Is there any political group today which is fully consistent? Such groups today are guided by or advocate blatant contradictions.
Do you have any personal political aspirations yourselves? Have you ever considered running for office?
Certainly not. And I trust that you don't hate me enough to wish such a thing on me.
That's worth a giggle and a pause. Peter.
Yeah, I don't know the John Birch Society she describes here, but the way she describes it, it sounds exactly like the intellectual precursor to Pat Buchanan and today's right? Like, which is exclusively concerned with conspiracy theories um, and being anti-left and anti-intellectual across the board. So I don't know if you know anything more about them.
I do. They, after the Cold War came about and America became quite concerned with the Soviet Empire and the spread of communism, it became also concerned with internal subversion. That is to say, this conspiracy that Ayn Rand is talking about. That's fluoride in our water is a communist conspiracy. And they were finding conspiracy theories, communists under every bed. And they were let me put it this way, if Senator McCarthy, who famously gives us the term McCarthyism, accusing people of communists, if he was correct but obnoxious, the John Birch Society was kind of conspiratorial, more like Tucker Carlson today.
Yeah.
And Candace Owen, finding conspiracies, communist conspiracies under every bed. And so Ayn Rand was skeptical of the idea that there were everything boiled down to a communist conspiracy. the John Birch, she actually knew people who were involved and had been friendly with people who were later involved in the John Birch Society. She kind of lost contact with those people once they joined the John Birch Society. Her main thrust is, what are you for? You say you're against communism, and Russia and China were their concerns. Now, to be fair to them, they would publish all kinds of material that you wouldn't get in the mainstream press about atrocities that were going on or had happened in the Soviet Union or communist China, when the mainstream press in America was kind of looking the other way. Still in the 1950s, the mainstream media was looking away from the horrors of Stalin or the horrors of Mao. And I'll give the John Birch Society this, but all they were was negative. And they were on, they were hyperactive on steroids when it came to believing that there was a communist conspiracy here and a communist conspiracy there. But for example, the Hollywood writer Maury Riskind, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a friend of both William Buckley's and Ayn Rand's. And he was one of the famous supporters of the John Birch Society at the time. He later quit the John Birch Society because he thought, even he thought that they were getting a little too conspiracy minded and a little wacky. Is that helpful?
Yeah, like it sounds like the usual, right? Like when because people cannot fathom a conspiracy of ideas, they have to resort to thinking it in terms of conspiracy of people, right? Like,
Precisely. There is no conspiracy needed. When people agree on certain philosophical premises, they will spontaneously act on those premises. It may look like it's coordinated, but there's no reason to think it's coordinated. It's a bunch of people who've actually accepted similar ideas.
and it
No
is,
conspiracy needed.
and there are some elements of truth to it, which gives it like a legitimacy, because as you say, if the media, for example, is widely whitewashing or withholding what's going on in the Soviet Union, right, that you could regard that at least as a conspiracy of people. But again, it's still goes back to a conspiracy of ideas. Nevertheless, it might feed, like it gives a certain sense of legitimacy to a conspiratorial mindset if something like that is going on.
Right, right. What's really interesting, though, is if you'd ask people in the middle of the 20th century in America in the 1950s or 60s, name, the most ferocious opponents of communism, Ayn Rand would be at the top of the list. But it's really, and Ayn Rand had associations with people that he's talking about here, National Review, John Birch Society, but she's being given here a wonderful opportunity to contrast herself from all of that. No, the National Review is the most dangerous magazine. The John Birch Society is too conspiratorial, and they don't see a matter of ideas. It's really a wonderful opportunity for her here to disassociate herself with the other famous, quote, anti-communists of the same period. Ayn Rand was on her own and happy to be on her own as an anti-communist, even though she was one of the most prominent anti-communist voices in America in the 20th century. Marco and Richard.
I don't know whether it's a result of this interview and this particular question that she wrote the article Extremism and the Art of Smearing, but that's where she refers to the John Birch Society, isn't it? Together with mother-in-laws. And that association as a form of ad hominem to damn people, by association, instead of engaging with the ideas that they represent and tackling the argument that way.
Yes, and historically you're correct. In 1964, it is exactly the campaign of Barry Goldwater. He was being accused in a vague sense of being an extremist. And Barry Goldwater had his own answer in 1964. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. Ayn Rand was, I think, even better about it in her defense of so-called right-wing extremism, i.e. Barry Goldwater. Extremism, what do you mean? Do you mean violent? No, you don't mean violent. What do you mean? Extremism. Well, that is an anti-concept. And it was in 1964 that this very thinking was coming up, and precisely in the context of the accusation that Barry Goldwater was an extremist when it came to his anti-communism. is exactly right. This is right when she's putting her finger on that and saying, extremism is an anti-concept, right? Eric, let's proceed. Oh, Peter.
Just really quickly on that note, I think I mentioned this before as well. One of the things that I loved most about, or I still love most about Leonard Peikoff's courses and Ayn Rand as well, is that they are so extreme, right? This, because I've never heard anything like this. Everybody I grew up with, the intellectuals I started to follow in my 20s, more conventional ones, they all moderate. They all try to wishy-wash. In a certain way, they're like modern artists, right? They want to be. They see a glory in being misunderstood, like having like something for everybody. So you can like find the middle, as modern politicians put it, right? Have no ideas, just find the middle so you can get the most votes. And yeah, just to re-emphasize how glad I am to, yeah, have those, like I have experienced people like Peikoff and Rand just be as black
Wonderful
and white as
extremist.
they can be,
Right.
and even go over the top with it, right?
Right.
To some extent, deliberately overdoing it, just as an to give me an antidote. That's what it feels like. Like it's so refreshing, right?
Flash of cold
Uh,
water in the
yeah,
face.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, right. Like for example, when Ayn Rand was asked, "What do you think? What does philosophy have to say about sex?" She says, "It's good." Right. Full
It's
stop.
good.
Like no subtlety. Just bam. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
how Leonard
She,
kept whenever he tried to make a point, he kept using the word infinitely. Like Protestant theologians are
right.
infinitely worse than Catholic ones, right? Things
Delightfully
like that.
extreme.
I
Right.
just love that. Yeah.
Delightfully extremist. Okay, Eric, pick it up.
But you are interested in politics, or at least in political theory, aren't you?
Let me answer you this way. When I came here from Soviet Russia, I was interested in politics for only one reason: to reach the day when I would not have to be interested in politics. I wanted to secure a society in which I would be free to pursue my own concerns and goals, knowing that the government would not interfere to wreck them, knowing that my life, my work, my future were not at the mercy of the state or of a dictator's whims. This is still my attitude today. Only today I know that such a society is an ideal not yet achieved, and that I cannot expect others to achieve it for me, and that I, like every other responsible citizen, must do everything possible to achieve it. In other words, I am interested in politics only in order to secure and protect freedom.
Wow. She came to this country so that she's interested in politics only so that she won't have to be interested in politics and the government gets the hell out of her way so she can pursue her own goals. Wow. On the other hand, since it is a value that I need and require, I will do everything I can to work for that future. Wow, what a perfect answer, right? It's like she got the balance exactly correct. Now someone say, well, the balance. No, no, no. She got principle A and principle B, and they're working in perfect harmony. Um, sure, I'm interested in politics because I don't want politics to be an interest. Peter.
Yeah, it just occurred to me also that this is the exact opposite attitude uh, of uh, of of so many politicians today, for whom politics is an end in itself, like of obtaining power, right? They have no ideas. They just want the power. They want the politics as an end in itself.
There is
Ayn
no
Rand wants
concern
it.
too
Yeah,
small. What did Mondami say? There is no concern too small that the government shouldn't be up. So the government
yeah,
should be micromanaging every little aspect of my life. He's the polar opposite of Mamdani's, there is no concern too small for government. Yeah, there is. Please stay out of my life, my bedroom, my bathroom, my business, my please stay out of my life, God damn it. I do not want you managing it all, much less micromanaging every detail and issue that might come up. Wow. Yeah, exactly right. Pooja.
in this answer, I just love the fact that she says that she cannot expect others to achieve it for her. You know, I mean, this is
God,
amazing.
is she amazing? If I want to live in a free society, I've got to do something about it. God, what an astonishing lady. Mhm.
Yeah, and this is and this is such an American attitude because with the can-do attitude of the Americans, you know, like, and I'm talking about, you know, being back in India and looking at America from outside, we always had this thought about when things go wrong, wrong decisions are made at the politics, you know, don't awake the sleeping giant, you know, like, because people are, you know, productive and doing their own stuff, but suddenly when they need their attention, Americans will turn their attentions to politics and correct matters, right? And that used to be a concept that we were aware of back then.
Yes, yes. Have gun will travel. We can do it ourselves. Thank you very much. I can do this. Please just get out of my way so I can take care of this. Americans have this, at least one. The America I grew up in. Now I'm sounding like an old man. I'm sounding like the very people when I was a kid. It just bothered the crap. What are you talking about? No, but the America I grew up in did have this absolutely can do, I can do it, just get out of my way attitude. If I want something done, if you want something done right, do it yourself. That was absolutely the attitude that I was raised with. Um, no one else is going to do it for you, right? You can't expect the state to do it. You can't expect the community to do it. You can't just fall back on family or tradition or government. No, no, no. You want it, you do it. You step up and you take the appropriate actions that will causally, in reality, achieve what you need, what you want. And it applies to politics. She's, concerned about politics because it's a problem, because she wants it not to be concerned about politics. But there it is. It's a problem. It's up to me to set the dynamite that will blow the boulder that's blocking the road. Yeah. It is quintessentially American as I see the American
And
sense of
just a
life.
follow up, I mean, this reminds me of Elon Musk, you know, and what he, you know, some of the people who got involved recently. Yeah, but with bad ideas still.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, let's proceed.
Throughout your work, you argue that the way in which the contemporary world is organized, even in the capitalist countries, submerges the individual and stifles initiative. In Atlas Shrugged, John Galt leads a strike of men of the mind, which results in the collapse of the collectivist society around them. Do you think the time has come for the artists, intellectuals, and creative businessmen of today to withdraw their talents from society in this way?
No, not yet. But before I explain, I must correct one part of your question. What we have today is not a capitalist society, but a mixed economy. That is, a mixture of freedom and controls, which by the presently dominant trend is moving towards dictatorship. The action in Atlas Shrugged takes place at a time when society has reached the state of dictatorship. When and if that happens, that would be the time to go on strike, but not until then.
Right. You'll notice Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged shows us a moment where America is crossing over into a world of dictatorship, crossing over into a world of censorship and no due process. And we witness before our eyes how due process and free speech and private ownership of businesses is being eroded and destroyed, as Hank Rearden has his property stolen, as an Equalization of Opportunity Act in effect imposes a censorship. And we're seeing it happen and happen and happen. So it's not, Ayn Rand is projecting a future, and she's reminding Toffler of that. We're not there yet. And it would be interesting when we're done with this to open up that. When do you think we get there? At what point? But in the meantime, let's have Ayn Rand to give the answer. Pooja.
Eric,
Or
follow up?
Eric, I'm sorry. Yeah.
What do you mean by dictatorship? How would you define it?
A dictatorship is a country that does not recognize individual rights, whose government holds total unlimited power over men.
What is the dividing line, by your definition, between a mixed economy and a dictatorship?
A dictatorship has four characteristics: one party rule, executions without trial for political offenses, expropriation or nationalization of private property, and censorship. Above all, this last. So long as men can speak and write freely, so long as there is no censorship, they can still have a chance to reform their society or to put it on a better road. When censorship is imposed, that is the sign that men should go on strike intellectually, by which I mean should not cooperate with the social system in any way, whatever.
Wow. Then she has to be right. There is no peaceful way to change a system that has censorship. There really isn't, is there? I mean, the function of representative government, democracy is not some magic pixie dust that confers legitimacy. The majority can be wrong, just as wrong as any monarch or dictator can be, right? So why do we prefer representative government? For the same reason we want no censorship. It provides us a peaceful means of changing. We don't need to go to a civil war or a revolution in order to improve things. So long as a society has a mechanism of peaceful change, that is, a modicum of due process, free speech, and I would add here to Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand doesn't think it's fundamental on one of the four fundamentals, but I would include it myself. Some mechanism of peaceful change like representative government. Continuing.
Short of such a strike, what do you believe ought to be done to bring about the societal changes you deem desirable?
It is ideas that determine social trends, that create or destroy social systems. Therefore, the right ideas, the right philosophy should be advocated and spread. The disasters of the modern world, including the destruction of capitalism, were caused by the altruistic collectivist philosophy. It is altruism that men should reject.
Yes, Eric.
So I was just noticing the way he phrased the question about to bring about societal changes you deem desirable. I mean, like Rand, I think earlier says, the purpose of her doing philosophy was she wanted to project the ideal man. So, like, I don't think Rand is interested in the perfect society. She wants to, have people have a view of men as ideals, and then the society will be the result of them having that self-conception.
Well, don't confuse her literary or aesthetic goal with the goal of her philosophy. Her literary goal was, as she explained in the goal of my writing, was the projection of the ideal man. From an aesthetic standpoint, she wanted to create, as she explained, characters that would interest her to contemplate. She wanted to create characters that were worthy of aesthetic contemplation for their own sake. That's not quite the same as her goal in laying out a philosophy. In laying out a philosophy, it's obviously got to be the underlying truth. That is to give us the correct understanding of our relationship, the relationship between consciousness and existence. So I would draw a distinction between the goal of her philosophy and the goal of her being a novelist, a literary artist, two distinct things. And so when you are developing a political system, you have to take all of that into account. That is to say, you do have to take into account the ramifications, across the board. You've got to do the full integration that induction requires in any scientific field. And that applies to political philosophy as much as it applies to anything else. Does that make sense?
For the last 20 years or so that I've known about Rand's ideas, like I've become convinced like the politics is so derivative.
Right.
Like earlier we spoke about the can-do action, like you've got to do it yourself to get it done. And yet in the most recently ended political fight over the funding of the government, the biggest complaint the Democrats had was, oh my gosh, all these people won't be able to get their food stamps, and how will they eat? And it's like, what? Like, that should be one of the basic things you get handled in life is being able to feed yourself and your family. And like it seems really simple. And why would that not happen just because, this payment system isn't working? And
Well,
and of course the Republicans have no defense against, well, why we shouldn't do this at all. Like, they don't talk
I'd
about that, which
remind,
is
I'd just remind us that we are enmeshed in a mixed economy in which there are
mhm.
people who are dependent on government programs. Retired people are dependent on Social Security. Now, had they just invested half of the FISA taxes that had been taken from them decade after decade as they were working and invested that in an ordinary, S&P index fund, they would have outperformed any return that Social Security would give them. Uh, I mean, things like that have been economically demonstrated. So but nonetheless, in the meantime, you can't just cut off Social Security, and I would include in that food stamps. A significant percentage of children, in poverty, are dependent upon food aid from the government. And ironically, I don't want to get into the government shutdown here, but one of the sad things is that what was the percentage they gave us? 16% of children depend upon food assistance from government. And so when you're in that context and it gets suddenly and abruptly cut off or threatened to be cut off because of a government shutdown, you are going to have a negative impact on people's lives. The Poor Women and Children Food Program, what we call SNAP or food stamps, is something people are dependent on. And we have so many things we can reform before then, right? We can get rid of all manner of economic regulations before then. There are all kinds of things we can do before we take on welfare mothers, as Ayn Rand would say. We have a situation in which people have grown dependent upon certain programs, and in this cruel game government shouldn't have that power over, shouldn't be able to cause certain people to be in food distress or not know where the next meal is coming from. But that is itself the situation that the government has landed us in. And as Ayn Rand said on more than one occasion, it's welfare mothers is not where she would start. She would phase out those kind of programs when there's all manner of things we can do. We can go to a gold standard. We can get rid of securities laws, commodities laws, antitrust laws, all kinds of things we can do to deregulate the economy that wouldn't have a direct impact on the poor, but which would get the economy going in the correct direction so that something like food stamps would be irrelevant in her
Yeah.
mind. I just
Well,
throwing in a little comment there, probably
I,
too many words.
I just totally disagree. I don't think they're dependent. I think they may have that sense about them. That may be how they think about it, but it just doesn't make physical sense that would be the case. In like, the amount of wealth that's in this country is just astounding.
Yes,
I don't know. It's
and
to me,
there really
it only lives because of that,
and I
the
understand
altruistic moral premises.
there really is no starvation in the sense that they're talking
No.
any more than there is this lack of medical care. Anyone can walk into a hospital if they need it in America, and they have to treat you. And if necessary, the hospital will submit the bill to the government. Yeah, and they're equivalent in the world of food charities too, food banks and so forth. I agree with you. There aren't people who are going without medical care. There aren't children who are out actually starving there. But in terms of feeding poor children, in terms of providing medical care to poor people, the government is up to their earlobes in it. So, just as a reality. In other words, what I'm suggesting is there can be a transition that wouldn't be so abrupt for people who've grown dependent upon government programs. You at least agree with that much, Eric?
No, I think it should be. I mean, this is such a stupid thing.
You'd ruthlessly
Absolutely.
end all medical care, retirement insurance, and food for poor children.
I mean, let's not get started about the medical thing, but it's just
Okay.
food just seems just so. It's such a simple problem. Any person can figure this out, and
Look,
at the very
the
least,
poorer you are, the more likely you are to be overweight in America.
I know.
So it's an astonishing reverse correlation. The more wealthy you are, the trimmer you are in America, and the poorer you are, the more overweight you are. So I believe me, I'm aware of the phenomenon you're talking about and the perverse incentives that you're talking about. And I agree it's wrong. The program needs to be phased out. I'm just talking about the order in which I would phase out government involvement. Okay, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I would only add here, this is like the curse of the mixed economy, right? Government provides solution for government created problems. It's
Right.
like take infrastructure, right? If you believe in like infrastructure spending, that's like a Democrat thing. But the fact is, government assumed the responsibility of almost all of infrastructure. So, fundamentally, that should be gotten away with, but I'd still rather have fixed the holes in the roads rather
Yeah.
than
Fix the potholes in the bridges, and yeah, exactly, because that is what they're doing. So in the meantime, and getting people to accept the idea that there should be no government roads is, let's face it, that's going to be a hard sell. I mean, they take for granted even more than they take it for granted in other areas like medicine or education. I mean, of course, government's got to provide medicine and education. Well, let's win those battles before we get to the point is, there ought not to be government roads at all, which will be, but once you get the principle, as Ayn Rand says, look, I don't look at it this way, like the coal industry versus the steel industry. Once you get the point about force, and I think there's more than that too. I think there'll have to be a feedback loop of experience coming off of I won't call it an opiate addiction, our government addiction, our addiction to government solutions. I think there can be a benevolent cycle going the other way that would demonstrate to people that it's good to undo those things. But getting people to see that we don't need government roads, boy, that's a hard sell, isn't it? What now, Daniel?
Yeah, and then there is the problem of like fixing it. Like when somebody like Liz Truss in UK is viewed as like the capitalist example, where it's like, well, she totally had the wrong way of going about it, but now
Liz
like
Truss is capital.
like
Truss is capital.
any deregulation, any privatization, any of that is like viewed as capitalism. But no, it like has to be done properly. Like privatization in Russia was screwed up. That like failed. But it was because there wasn't like a proper way of like how to do it. It was just a state fell apart and things followed from there. But
Right.
that the Russian privatization is viewed as like that's capitalism.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you mean by privatization? Is it a bunch of oligarchs getting special favors from the government, or is it a real privatization? Eric.
We'll continue my role as the interviewer.
Please do, yes.
And how would you define altruism?
It is a moral system which holds that man has no right to exist for his own sake, that service to others is the sole justification of his existence, and that self-sacrifice is his highest moral duty, value, and virtue. This is the moral base of collectivism, of all dictatorships. In order to seek freedom and capitalism, men need a non-mystical, non-altruistic, rational code of ethics, a morality which holds that man is not a sacrificial animal, that he has the right to exist for his own sake, neither sacrificing himself to others nor others to himself. In other words, what is desperately needed today is the ethics of objectivism.
And there we come to really one of her most powerful points of all time. Altruism is the base of all dictatorship. Boom. Mic drop. Megan.
Oh, Pooja's doing such a beautiful job, but if she needs a break, my tone.
How you doing, Pooja?
I can go on for another 5 minutes. At 10:30, we'll hand over.
And we're almost there. So we only have a few more questions. So thank you, Megan. Let's keep going.
Then what you are saying is that to achieve these changes, one must use essentially educational or propagandistic methods?
Yes, of course.
What do you think of your antagonist's contention that the moral and political principles of objectivism place you outside the mainstream of American thought?
I don't acknowledge or recognize such a concept of mainstream of thought. That might be appropriate to a dictatorship, to a collectivist society, in which thought is controlled and in which there exists a collective mainstream of slogans, not of thought. There is no such thing in America. There never was. However, I have heard that expression used for the purpose of barring from public communication any innovator, any nonconformist, anyone who has anything original to offer. I am an innovator. This is a term of distinction, a term of honor, rather than something to hide or apologize for. Anyone who has new or valuable ideas to offer stands outside the intellectual status quo. But the status quo is not a stream, let alone a mainstream. It is a stagnant swarm. It is the innovators who carry mankind forward.
Wow, think of it. It is when the minute you say the mainstream of American thought in Ayn Rand's view, you're already it's more like a fetid bog, right? There's no stream to it. There's no progress to it. It's not going anywhere, is it? Like a stream is going somewhere. It is just a fetid bog if you've got a mainstream anything. In it, what you're really saying is we oppose innovative thought. Because all innovative thought would necessarily stand out any mainstream, any currents. No, she doesn't believe in currents. She's swimming the current. I love it. Against the current. Isn't that great? I just dig the way she just in one little answer, so pithy in her response. Brilliant. Peter.
Yeah, I really admire her ability to communicate that point so that anyone can still follow without getting into philosophy, because I'm sure at the back of her mind she was thinking Kant's collective subjectivism, where truth is public, all that pragmatist garbage, right? That drives this notion that we just need to take a poll to find out the truth, phenomenal truth, whatever that means. Yeah, because I constantly, when I can do some level of like philosophical detection, not as good as she obviously, but when I do, then I start talking about Kant and people just shake their head at me and have no idea what I'm talking about. Understandably, because I'm bringing in this whole other context, which people don't have, but she gives such a better answer that, yeah, is much easier for anyone to follow.
Precision of her communication is astonishing. Really, isn't it? When we began, some of you might have missed it, we were talking about Ayn Rand's accent. You know, she was brought up speaking Russian and French and knew it fluently, learned German, then obviously mastered American English as she does. But she has this ongoing accent. To hell with the accent. Don't worry about your accent if you're going to be so precise and use words with such clarity, lucidity, and precision. Ayn Rand is unlike any other writer when it comes to that degree of exactness and clarity. And you know, what can you say? Pooja.
And it's not just the words, you know, this is the novelist and her coming out. Like she's giving us an alternative visual in our mind. Like they said mainstream, then she breaks it down, stream versus mainstream, and then gives us an alternative stagnant swarm. You know,
like only a novelist, like an artist in words can do. You don't mean a swamp, you don't mean a stream, you mean a swamp. Right. And so it corrects the image, if you will. Okay, Eric, let's finish this up.
Right. Do you believe that objectivism as a philosophy will eventually sweep the world?
Nobody can answer a question of that kind. Men have free will. There is no guarantee that they will choose to be rational at any one time or in any one generation. Nor is it necessary for a philosophy to sweep the world. If you ask the question in a somewhat different form, if you say, do I think objectivism will be the philosophy of the future? I would say yes, but with this qualification. If men turn to reason, if they are not destroyed by dictatorship and precipitated into another dark ages, If men remain free long enough to have time to think, then objectivism is the philosophy they will accept.
Why?
In any historical period when men were free, it has always been the most rational philosophy that won. It is from this perspective that I would say, yes, objectivism will win. But there is no guarantee, no predetermined necessity about it.
You are sharply critical of the world as you see it today, and your books offer radical proposals for changing not merely the shape of society, but the very way in which most men work, think, and love. Are you optimistic about man's future?
Yes, I am optimistic. Collectivism as an intellectual power and a moral ideal is dead. But freedom and individualism and their political expression, capitalism, have not yet been discovered. I think men will have time to discover them. It is significant that the dying collectivist philosophy of today has produced nothing but a cult of depravity, impotence, and despair. Look at modern art and literature with their image of man as a helpless, mindless creature doomed to failure, frustration, and destruction. This may be the objectivist, this may be the collectivist psychological confession, but it is not an image of man. If it were, we would never have risen from the cave. But we did. Look around you and look at history. You will see the achievements of man's mind. You will see man's unlimited potentiality for greatness and the faculty that makes it possible. You will see that man is not a helpless monster by nature, but he becomes one when he disregards that faculty, his mind. And if you ask me, what is greatness? I will answer. It is the capacity to live by the three fundamental values of John Galt: reason, purpose, self-esteem.
I mean, my God, here is the woman giving a nice integrative bow being tied around the entire interview. I mean, from aesthetics to politics to basic philosophy, it's reason, individualism. And you can see its impact in art, personal relationships, career, politics. And what an amazing interview here. And she just puts an amazing bow wrapped around the entire thing there. Reason, purpose, self-esteem. Unbelievable. Boy, that lady could give an interview, huh? Really breathtaking. The scope, so you get a field of her views on everything from human relationships and art all the way to epistemology and politics. The scope of it and how it's all just brilliantly integrated, and how you can see her philosophical ideas interacting and being applied to real world problems. This interview is an absolute gem, maybe the best interview ever done with Ayn Rand, in my view, and I hope you share that view. But what a very, very powerful and insightful interview she gave here. You really see that for her, it's not, abstractions are not over here and real world problems are over here. For her, you can see that there aren't isolated issues in philosophy, that philosophy is an integrated whole. It absolutely remarkable. I hope you share my view, and I want to thank you very much for joining us in this astonishing thing. And I think we're unique in having a discussion group on her Playboy interview in 1964. Pooja.
Oh, I was going to say that uh, once I saw, once I read this question, the first thing that came into my mind is, well, what would she think about it today, right? Will she still say that she's optimistic? And then I was kind of like thinking back and forth and realized the one thing you cannot take away, the fact of reality, is that men do have free will, right? Like that can't go away. That cannot, yeah, go ahead.
60 years later, I bet there's very little she would change here. 60 years later, I bet she would just say, only more so. You know, though she gave those kind of answers over the decades too. Miss Rand, have you changed any of your fundamental ideas? No, I'm just more. I'm just more convinced. And so would she say we're a mixed economy heading towards a dictatorship? Yeah. Would she say that we've reached a point of unbearable cultural collapse? Yeah. Would she say that, would she even say that collectivism as a ideal is powerfully motivating us? Well, by default, tribalism has been on the rise, but as an intellectual idea, it's just as dead as it ever was. So there really isn't much that I would say that she would actually change about this. She would be, I think, a little more desperate in terms of how far we've gone down the road. That is to say, people still have free will, they can still pull it out. There's still something of an American sense of life. But I think she would say, if you would say, do you still agree with what you said in 1964, Miss Rand? My guess is she would say, yes, only more so. Make sense? Pooja.
Yeah, and so the fact that man have free will gives us hope, that hope can never be killed. But then there's also hope for objectivism because of what she says, that whenever the culture has become more, towards reason, they have adopted the better philosophy,
Right,
right?
right. Well, it's slow, but it is encouraging to see the rise of popularity in objectivism. I have witnessed this for 50 years now, I have to admit, and it has been frustrating because we have effectively no influence on politics at all. But have I seen encouraging signs? I mean, Ayn Rand's philosophy is so very radical of the ideas infiltrating the rest of culture. I have seen that. And there is some cause for hope. And although things look like they're heading in a very bad direction from both political parties, I think that when cultural change does happen, I think that it'll be like a dam breaking in terms of if we reach a good point, it'll be like a dam breaking, and positive change can happen very rapidly. Humans do have free will. Eric.
I'm struck again on her line, but freedom and individualism and their political expression, capitalism, have not yet been discovered. And I still think it has not yet been discovered. I think like more people understand some economics, like there are many writers who are able to say, yeah, tariffs are bad in principle, but they can't give a moral defense of why you should be able to trade with whomever you create an agreement with. Like they don't speak about that at all.
Following
Uh,
year, Ayn Rand, this is 1964. The following year, Ayn Rand would come out with a collection of essays called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, where she gave moral and practical arguments for true laissez-faire capitalism. But that's the way she framed it, you see. We have not yet achieved capitalism, and it is a moral ideal.
And the best I can tell, like most people who use the word capitalism, or they may even use the word late stage capitalism, are mostly its enemies. And
no, late stage gives it away, right? You're
yeah.
giving away your dialectical approach to history, right? This is late stage capitalism. As if there's a historical inevitable, pattern to the, erosion of capitalism. And it's solid Marxism, or at least a confession of a Hegelian approach, isn't it? Pooja.
So she's saying, when men turn to reason, they adopt a better philosophy. That reminds me of the philosophy Who Needs It, where she says, if I can show you the importance of philosophy, you will adopt objectivism, right? So
Right.
before we can convince people of objectivism, we can still work on, getting people to be more reasonable and understand the importance of abstract ideas.
That's it, insofar as they can see it. And it will be a slow piece by piece thing. You guys are the exception to the rule. You guys are enormously philosophical, thoughtful, intelligent people who take the time and the effort and make the choice to take the effort and the time to figure things out, because you either understand or have a sense of the importance of ideas. This makes this group here exceptional, right? The rest of the world, it won't be, with many people, it will come as, an epiphany. I don't really trust epiphanies. I think of back about all the epiphanies that I went through. They really only stimulated me to further study and better integration. And it's that epiphany that, oh, I see the connection now. Now I need to really chew it and get it. Now that I know makes me kind of exceptional. And I think you guys are like that too. Sure, there'll be epiphanies, but it'll be a piece by piece thing. I say dam break when it comes to, there'll come a critical mass where they'll finally get the idea. Oh, so it's not just the coal industry and it's not just the steel industry. It's nationalizing industries. And when we even come close to that, that'll be that breathtaking moment right before you can see the crack down the whole, dam as the river comes pouring through. If America or if the world reaches such a state, that's, I think, what it'll look like. But it will come in stages, that growing understanding. It must. That's the way it works. There's no skipping the law of cause and effect. Is there? And one of the things we learn from objectivism is the law of cause and effect. But look at history. And if you look at history, sometimes it's a little disappointing, because when you think about the difference between the Dark Ages and the Renaissance, or the Renaissance and, the Industrial Revolution, there were steps that took, the causal steps. It had to happen bit by bit. It couldn't happen overnight. But when you look at it in terms of the broader perspective on history, the blink of an eye, the blink of an eye. From, the 10,000 meter elevation, it's a blink of an eye, to mix my metaphors. Pooja.
Just a question, personal anecdote question, I guess. So this was printed in what, in 1960s? So I was wondering if
March of 1964.
Right. So then, did you know about objectivism or Rand, like you personally? Did you know her then? And
I wasn't even a year old. I was an infant in my mother's arms when this interview came out. So I think she may have still been nursing me when this interview came out. So I'm afraid I was completely oblivious to all these sorts of issues. But what's remarkable is that, let's see, I must have read this for the first time in 1978, when I was 15 years old, to the year I turned 15. So yeah, and that was 1978. So it was 47 years ago. So yeah, I've been interested in objectivism since I was a teenager. I read Ayn Rand's novels when I was 14, 15, and at the age of 15 and 16, I was consuming aggressively everything I could get my little hands on written by Ayn Rand. I don't know what set me up for that so perfectly. I'll give myself some credit for some good choices, but no, I was not yet interested in Ayn Rand's ideas. I was still a babe in arms. And if you think
follow up
about
that, Daniel, before Daniel speaks. So I was just wondering what kind of, like, people nowadays, like they come back and they say, oh, I heard Rush and that's how I got into objectivist. I'm wondering if a Playboy, this interview, existed and people, read, many years later, and that's how they found or what the impact was, immediately after she gave this interview.
it was really interesting, because both the objectivist press and Playboy offered printed pamphlets of the interview. It's a very rare thing for the magazine itself, because when the magazine comes out, everyone's reading the magazine. I understand it was a big selling edition of it. And in volume 2 of their anthologies on the interviews, this is interview number 1 in that volume. So Playboy itself thought the interview was an important one among the interviews that they gave. And they gave interviews to, figures from across the intellectual and political spectrum, really important interviews with people like William Buckley or Gore Vidal, or, you can go right down, or Fidel Castro, or, write down a huge list of interviews, and Playboy themselves thought this was one of their best, most important interviews, as they explained in the introduction to it here in this volume of the Playboy Interview. Playboy, people, the joke goes, with pictures of beautiful women in an undressed state, let's put it as clinically as possible. And the joke would be, oh yeah, you read it for the articles. But the truth is that in its heyday, Playboy magazine had excellent articles, thoughtful articles, and brilliant interviews with famous people. But this may be their absolute best, because Ayn Rand was absolutely the best interview subject. Mike Wallace, before this, several years earlier, Ayn Rand had been interviewed on probably the biggest interview show on television at the time, in the late 50s and early 60s, a journalist by the name of Mike Wallace. And the way he described the interview with her, you just don't have interview subjects who can talk extemporaneously and give fantastic answers like that, integrated into a consistent philosophy, and yet interesting and eye-popping in terms of what she's saying. He said you couldn't find a person who could just speak for hours in that way. And so many interviewers came away from the interview process with Ayn Rand saying, she's unlike any interview subject you'll ever have. Promise. It'll be integrated, philosophical. She'll give you controversial, interesting answers, and yet she'll get you thinking. And that's the way Mike Wallace saw it. That's the way Playboy magazine saw it. Ayn Rand was a dazzle. Her question and answer periods. I don't have to tell you this because I know you guys have lived through it with me for the last couple of years. Her question and answer periods after lectures, if she would be lecturing at Columbia University or lecturing at Boston's Ford Hall Forum, the question period afterwards was often almost as interesting and powerful as the speech she was giving that evening. So yeah, Ayn Rand, with her Russian accent, could rivet, hold fast into their seats, and dazzle a large live audience. People who came to boo and jeer would often end up applauding, being surprised by their own applause at the end of the interview. She was one remarkable public speaker. And just in giving extemporaneous answers to questions, she could absolutely blow people away. Folks, I think this means that we're ready to start taking on objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. And I think this means that y'all better have read the introduction and chapter 1. Now, I don't think we'll be able to do whole chapters in a single session. We're going to have to break down certainly some of these chapters into multiple sessions. And I expect metaphysics, although it seems like the simplest and most straightforward in one way, in another sense, it's got issues that we need to be really attendant to. Let's put it that way. So do have read chapter 1, but with the understanding that we're probably only going to get through a portion of it next Sunday. But we will be beginning on, I talk to Leonard a lot these days, and the thing that he is most proud of is this book that we're about to get into. It is, in his view, far and away his greatest achievement. I try and remind him, gosh, Leonard, no, think of how many people you saved from rationalism as a psychoepistemological issue. Or think, Leonard, what you did in the field of induction. Or think, Leonard, what you did in the field of historiography. And say, yeah, you're way too modest, Leonard, I'll tell him. And he'd say, yeah. But the thing by far, that I am proudest of is Opar. That, he said, if I want any of my work to last, it's this thing. Pooja.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we can kind of go a little bit more slow and say we're going to do like 3 sections or something like that, so.
Yeah. I want to take it a little bit spontaneously because a lot depends on you guys. The questions you have, if you guys have particular issues, because everyone's a little different in what issues they find more difficult and easier. I mean, we can identify from the outset there are going to be issues that are controversial and not, automatically graspable, I think, by most people. And maybe I'd include free will or something in that, right? or altruism in that. That might require some, rolling up of our sleeves to get into that. Maybe I'm just confessing my own context. And on each of you has your own context, and I want to tailor it for your needs and what you guys want to talk about. So I'm not going to give one section or two sections or three sections at a time kind of rule. I'm going to let it play out sort of as we spontaneously move through this. But you're right, it will be more sessions than chapters by far. The best I can promise at this point, and let's leave it that loose. I think it'd probably be best. So you guys can tell me what you're having trouble with, or you find most interesting, or want further discussion on. Peter.
Yeah, just I wanted to know, when it comes to referencing page numbers and the like, which edition is there any particular edition you're going to be using? I have this one I think is printed in 93, I guess.
That'll do. If it was printed from 1990 in the 1990s in hardback, we'll go by the pagination in that. I don't think the pagination has changed at all in the hardback, but it might have. If it has, make sure you've got a copy that looks like the original edition in hardcover, because if we're going to have pagination.
James?
Yes.
I do have the 30th anniversary edition that came out recently. Do you want to check the number of the page?
Yes.
And see if it's the same? For example, chapter 9 happiness starts at 325.
Why?
Yeah, it's the same for me.
Right. This is a first edition, not the 30th anniversary edition.
But is it the same page?
Same page, 325.
Okay, so I assume different editions are still the same.
I'm assuming that it's the same as well. Thank you, Daniel. Okay. That was a great insight. Happiness begins on 325 in the first edition of the hardback and in the 30th anniversary edition. So just have a hardback of this, and the pagination should work. Let me boast a little here. I've got the coolest copy. Leonard Peikoff signed it in 1991 to Jim, a charter member of the class of 91, whose questions and comments were always uniformly excellent. Thank you for your contribution, Leonard. That's mine. And it's the one I'll be using. And so until then, have a great week.
Thank you, Jim.